Okay, tonight I'm going to talk, or this afternoon, I'm going to talk about science and religion. Why can't the Americans be like the Canadians? I'm a little bit hesitant because Margaret Derry, bless her, went back to graduate school in the 1990s, went to the University of Toronto and did a degree in history. And she's been telling me for the last 24 hours that as a proper historian, historians of science just don't do proper history. I'm not even a historian of science. I'm a philosopher of science. So I should tell you that in many respects, this is a little bit of an amateur job. But I've been very much involved in the science-religion debate, particularly the fight against creationists, for a long time. I was a witness in Arkansas back in 1981, along with people like Steve Gould and others. So I've certainly, as it were, put my time in the trenches on this. So now I live in the South. This, for me, epitomizes Canadian theology, Canadian religion. This is an advertisement that the United Church, I believe, used to put out, suggesting that people might take an interest. And what you'll see is the little yellow stickers are parts where you agree either. I'm not sure whether you agree with the United Church. I don't know what it would mean to say that you agree with the United Church, but perhaps it's parts of the Bible that you agree with. You'll notice there don't seem to be any parts at the first early chapters, and for what I can make out, the Gospels are missed out too. But and the purple parts are the parts where you disagree, and that seems to me to epitomize in really quite a serious way how I regard Canadian Protestant Christianity, how I regard English Protestant Christianity, a great deal of it. I don't mean that it isn't worthwhile. That's not what I'm saying. I don't mean that people don't feel very strongly about things, because that's not what I'm saying. But what I do mean is that there is a degree of tolerance, of extension, of feeling that, whoops, the other side might have a good point, and things of that nature. So that's how I'm sort of categorizing Canadian thought in this way. And the simple fact of the matter is, that's not the way that religion is done in America. It just simply isn't. That as far as the new atheists are concerned, this is where we take our stand, that we are modified monkeys, folks. We are not modified dirt, but we are, as Thomas Henry Huxley once said, we are modified monkeys, and everything starts right there. And that this is, and I don't think that this is a bad way to sort of try to capture the idea. For instance, just at the moment at Calvin College, a very good liberal arts college in Western Michigan, there's a couple of faculty who are under threat of being fired for suggesting that possibly Adam and Eve were not literal figures, and that humans did not start with one pair but started with a group. And so, yeah, there's no question but that this is, as it were, the flag that's going on. This is important. These people are not arguing past each other. They're arguing about the same things. I mean, there are genuine disagreements. This is not a question of ships that pass in the night. And there's no question that for what I'm calling the evangelical right, evolution is, for them, just as important as it is for the new atheists. I mean, it's just as important for them to reject it, but the point is it's just as prominent. And as I'm sure many of you know, the joke, that they genuinely believe that there are miracles, interventions at some point in the course of nature, and of course that these interventions were done by the good God. Incidentally, one more thing is, this isn't just an academic debate. This is something which is going on. What I want to do is, I think the creationists, I think the religious right are wrong, but that's not what I'm here to do this afternoon. I'm here to say, why? What's going on? Why is this? Why is there this debate? Why is this going on? As I say, moving forward, we get Charles Darwin in the middle of the 19th century, who, as people know, took the voyage, went on the Beagle voyage for 5 years in the first half of the 1830s. He did not convert to, or did not become an evolutionist during the trip, but it was after he got back. And interestingly, it wasn't really, people often say, well, it must have been the fossils. It wasn't really the fossils. It was geographical distributions, particularly the distribution of the giant tortoises and some of the birds. It looks, the finches are certainly important later. It's probably the mockingbirds, the difference between mockingbirds on the different islands. And it wasn't until Darwin got home and gave his birds to a man called John Gould, who was a leading ornithologist. And Gould looked at these birds and said, Darwin, there's no question these are different species. It was at that moment that Darwin said the only way I can explain this is through evolution, through, well, he worked and worked and worked and came up with his mechanism of natural selection after a couple of years. This, incidentally, is the first tree of life that we've got drawn by Darwin. It's not the first tree of life that anybody ever drew. There were hundreds of people doing trees of life. So Darwin was certainly copying, if you like. I mean, he wasn't I don't mean plagiarizing. I mean, he was just picking up and copying what others were doing. But this one is clearly intended to be an evolutionary tree of life, and that's where he was different. And so Darwin comes up with his ideas, although for reasons which are still not entirely sure about. He doesn't publish for another 20 years, and finally he publishes his great work on the origin of species in 1859. And so let me conclude by coming down to the present. Let me just refer to, not discuss, but refer to then the most modern incarnation of this evangelical right, the so-called intelligent design movement, which blew up in the 1990s and still goes strong. Probably the Bible of the work was published by Michael Behe. He wrote Darwin's Black Box. Michael Behe is a biochemist at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, and he argues that sometimes you come across things which are so complex they could not have been put together by regular laws. And his example that he uses is, he calls it irreducible complexity, and the example that he uses is of a mousetrap. And he says it's two different countries. And I think that what we've got then is not so much a theological debate as a social debate. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.